Welcome into the Michigan State Hockey Hub as Michigan State's coming off of a tough weekend series with Wisconsin. And today I have Sam in to talk to us again. Sam, I've already forgot how to pronounce your last name. Sklar, is that right?
Yeah, you pretty much got it. Sklar.
Okay, these last names, everyone who's come on the show, I always ask them because it's like my greatest fear to just constantly say someone's name incorrectly. So Sam, where are you from, and how did you get started covering Michigan State hockey?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota, just about the suburbs from there. So kind of grew up having to like hockey, I guess, being the state of hockey. Even though I actually never played hockey and I could barely skate, I was more of a basketball and a soccer player growing up. But I always loved following the Wild and a little bit of the University of Minnesota. Um, so that kind of always just got my passion for hockey. And I currently write for the team with the state news. For this is my second year doing it, covering the hockey team. So that means I'm also a student here at Michigan State. I'm a junior studying sports journalism and graphic design, and I love it here at Michigan State. It's been one of the best decisions that I've ever made in my life coming
Yeah.
here, and so yeah, I just started working with the state news. This is my fifth semester now, and I also covered the football team this past semester.
Okay, so then let's do a tiny bit of football talk. Michigan State landed a transfer, mere speed, 6'2" or 6'3" corner. Definitely a position of need that they had there. They have a lot of guys and a lot of transfer guys. I'm just not sure if they have a lot of players, if that makes any sense. Maybe I should say they have a lot of players, but I'm not sure they really have that guy. Ronald Williams, Amir Speed, Lowry,
Charles Grant.
Kimbrough, yeah.
I mean,
So that was a good pickup. Who's the running back that they're looking at from Colorado who everyone's kind of buzzing about? Do you know his name?
I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but I have been seeing people on Twitter, you know, doing the eye emojis and
Yeah.
putting some hype over his name, and I think it maybe has to do something with just the connection between Mel Tucker and Colorado.
Yeah, he was like the player of the year in their conference last year, 2 years ago or something. So
It,
with Kenneth Walker going, but this is a hockey show. We don't want to dive too deep into football, but so let's get to it. Let's look at the Big Ten standings now after this previous weekend. And those of you who are on Spotify who will not be able to see this, I'll read them off. Michigan, first place, 29 points. Excuse me. Ohio State, second place, 27. Minnesota, 25. Notre Dame, 24. So those four right there, kind of in a tier of their own right now. Drop down to the last three. Wisconsin, 16. Michigan State, 14. Penn State, 9. So Michigan State was ahead of Wisconsin, and it was looking like, okay, maybe they can, a couple weeks ago, climb their way up a little bit, maybe even to third place, fourth place. Well, after Wisconsin swept them, and the week before that, Minnesota swept them, Michigan State is now comfortably in second to last place, a position that they're used to kind of being in over the past few years, being near the bottom there. So, um, what do you think around the Big Ten right now? Do you think those top four teams are going to stay? There's going to be a lot of shifting there.
I think that this next month is going to be very interesting for not even just the Big Ten, but college hockey as a whole, with the Olympics starting in a couple of weeks. That all these top-notch players from you know all different countries around the world are going to be leaving their college hockey programs for a couple of weeks, and I mean we see it here in the Big Ten with Michigan's losing a significant amount of players, Minnesota too, and I mean it'll be really interesting to see how those teams sort of respond to losing some of their top players like that. And I mean, going into last weekend, I thought that was a really big opportunity for Michigan State to sort of establish themselves maybe in that middle tier of the Big Ten. If they would have maybe swept Wisconsin for a second time or even picked up 3 points there, I think that it would have positioned themselves to maybe make a run at getting home ice for the Big Ten tournament with those teams losing a bunch of players. But obviously we know how last weekend went with getting us swept by Wisconsin on the road. I think really did put them. I think we do sort of realize now what this team is. It's hard without Lewandowski in the lineup, but it's a familiar spot down here in the bottom two, positions for Michigan State. I've got sort of a running joke that when I think Michigan State is 7-23-2 since I started covering them because I did every single game last season and I've done now I think 5 games this season and they've all been losses. So I in my state news group chats, everyone kind of hates on me for being bad luck to the team.
I'm emailing the state news immediately after this, and you will no longer be covering the hockey team. You're going to be full. So okay. So how about the football team? What is your record there?
Well, it was my first year covering the team, so
Okay, so yeah, you're full football guy after this. So I hope you enjoy this podcast because it's going to be your last as a hockey guy.
actually I had somebody DM me on Twitter, just a random person after the game on Saturday, and they said like, "I love your coverage so much, but respectfully, please stop covering Michigan State hockey." And I thought
Yeah, it's been a fun year in a way,
oh yeah.
and it's been a much better year. Um, you can just see the gap. There's still a long ways to go, and
Mhm,
we'll get into that. But yeah, Michigan State fumbled the bag this weekend. They let Wisconsin get ahead of them. There's still hockey left. There's still time, but let's look ahead at Michigan State's schedule. Ohio State this week. Ohio State, who we're going to talk about later, has been very good. That is a good hockey team.
mhm,
Right after that, Minnesota, who just lost their goaltender to the NHL, Jack LaFontaine, in kind of a bizarre timing move. Um, they split against Alaska their first weekend without their number one goaltender. So you have Ohio State, Minnesota. After that, oh yeah, by the way, at Minnesota,
mhm.
at Michigan, and then Joe Louis the next game. I'll actually be at both of those games.
Little Caesars, yeah.
Yep. Oh,
Wish
sorry. Yep.
I wish you were
I,
at
I, I'm
that would actually be
I'm
really
sure that mistake happens a lot, but then right after that, Notre Dame, and then to finish off the year, Penn State. So you're looking at playing those top four teams in that tier that we mentioned before, and then Penn State. Um, it's going to be tough. And honestly, I know just a few weeks ago I was really excited about this team. They were 16th in the pairwise. They were looking pretty good. GLI happened. They had an OT winner, David Gucciardi against Michigan Tech, and I thought, okay, they hung in there with Western Michigan pretty well, who was a top 5 team. Um, these first couple weekends are really going to see where we're at, and it has not gone well. Pretty big collapse against Minnesota, and then getting swept by Wisconsin. Now, I am a big Buffalo Bills fan. So
okay.
last Saturday night, I was very preoccupied watching the Bills
Mhm.
stomp the Patriots, which was fantastic. But I did not see a second of the game Saturday. So give us just a real quick recap of how Saturday looked.
Well, I think Saturday they looked much better, and obviously the score sort of indicates that in a way. Michigan State was winning there in the third period, um, leading by I believe it was 2-1, and then Michigan State had an early power play. I remember in the third period, and it was honestly I think the best the power play had looked all weekend long. On that, they had numerous scoring chances, a lot of them going over to Jeremy Davidson, but nothing was able to get past Jared Moe from Wisconsin, and then just moments later, I believe, is when Kyle Haskins took that 5-minute major penalty for contact to the head, so he goes off game misconduct, and Wisconsin gets that 5-minute power play, which Dan Cole sort of talked about. He was not too happy with the officials for that call. But
Big Ten officials.
no, and in that earlier, I can't remember if it was the first game on Friday or Saturday's game when Michigan State also had a 5-minute power play with Roman Ashan. got ejected with a major penalty, and they couldn't capitalize on it. They didn't score in those 5 minutes, but Wisconsin did on Saturday night. They scored 2 goals in a quick span and suddenly led 3-2. And then that's kind of when all the wheels fell off, and you start seeing Michigan State take some of these, dumb penalties late in games where you're kind of just digging your own hole at that point if you're going to be constantly killing penalties all the time. It's really
Yeah.
hard to get an offense that's already sort of struggling without Lewandowski in the lineup and without Griffin Lochran last weekend. It's they kind of dig themselves in an uphill battle there.
Yeah. Well, as we move on, or before we move on to talk about MSU and the struggles in a larger scale, everyone that's watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe. That's how we help grow this and how more people can see it. I don't make any money off of this at all, but I want as many people to see it as possible, just so more people can learn about hockey. If you're listening on Spotify, please subscribe as well. Tell a friend. That's the thing that you can do the most to help us out. So as we transition into Michigan State over the past over the past few weeks, 6 games, they have 5 losses and an OT winner. Um, and really, what it comes down to is the offense has not been great. 12 goals in the past 6 games, so 2 goals against, and it's not the worst in the world, only scoring 2 goals. And I know they're not the most offensively, um, driven team, and that's not really their forte. But when you're playing the likes of Minnesota and top, really good top 20 teams in Michigan Tech and Western Michigan, you just have to score more because they are more skilled than you. Um, as you mentioned, you got to take advantage of the power plays, the major penalties, things like that. Lewandowski's been missing it, and you can really see it. I don't think I think they've won 1 game without Lewandowski this year. He came back. This is his, super senior year, whatever you want to call it, from COVID.
Mhm.
And he has played so well, leads the team in points. But the issue has just been the injuries. Hasn't been able to get on the ice, and it's really starting to affect the team. And I don't know. You may know more than me about his injury. I'm not even sure if he's going to be back this year. Do you know?
I don't know if he's gonna be back or not this year. Like, it's up in the air, I think, but I don't expect him to play this weekend. Uh,
Yeah.
which, obviously the record sort of speaks to itself on how impactful he is to the team, and that his absence is clearly felt. And I mean, he's not even really a guy who necessarily creates offense a lot of the times for others. He's not one of those like stick handling guys that's going to create flashy passes and all the separation. But him just being in the lineup, it does wonders for Michigan State. Also, just I think his presence as a leader on the team, being the longest tenured player, um, it goes a long way. And when you take him out, the scoring depth, or the lack of scoring depth for that matter, really gets amplified for this team. And they've needed somebody to sort of step up in his place to sort of be that number one guy, and they just haven't really gotten it.
Yeah. And, it's not always about, is he a playmaker? Is the puck coming? He's not a Taro Hirose passing, but what he brings, not only his shot and his scoring ability, but you have to respect that. So if you're playing defense, you can't sag off of him as much, or it's always in the back of your head where he is, and that can create some more open ice for others. So, um, it's a little bit of everything. They're definitely missing him. However, there's nothing that they can do about that now. Scoring depth has to step up. And, I like a lot of these new players, and I like the growth from certain players. Um, However, what we're showing on the screen right now are the forwards on this team, and most of these guys are in the lineup every night. A couple, kind of in and out of the lineup, but
Mhm.
these are forwards with 1 or less goals this year. And before anyone gets upset, I understand not everyone's game is scoring goals. I'm just showing the number of forwards who are in the lineup often who are not goal scorers. Tucker Pap, Mueller, Joshua, Matson, Goodsir, Kelly, Hodges, Haskins. That's a lot of players who are not putting the puck in the back of the net.
That's 3.
So I just want to quickly go through each one. I don't want to take too long and just kind of see what you think they bring. If you think that they have more in their game, just kind of your thoughts. So we'll start with Jesse Tucker, who I want to go ahead and say is one of my favorite players.
Oh, yeah.
And he generates offense, crafty passer, high hockey IQ, flies around the ice, throws his body around. Does he lead the? I think he leads the team in assists.
Yeah, I think so. I was
I
just
don't know. Does he have like 13 or 14? I'm going off the top of my head.
He's got 14, yeah, he leads the team.
14. And I know he's going to end up scoring more in his career. You know, he's only a freshman. So what are your thoughts of Jesse Tucker so far?
Yeah, I mean, he's been a great addition to this team, playing as a young freshman. I've been really impressed with his forechecking ability because I don't think I've really seen that from a center at Michigan State over the past couple of seasons, where he's just super aggressive when Michigan State does their sort of dump and chase strategy. But he's always seems like he's wreaking havoc on the opposing defense or even goaltender. I remember that goal against Minnesota a couple weeks ago where he forced LaFontaine to sort of mishandle the puck, and then Eric Mindorf, had a wide open net. And it's plays like that, yeah, he only has 1 goal on the season, but like 14 assists, and he's a guy. I think he's definitely the most promising player for Michigan State and someone that you can sort of build upon in the future.
Yeah, he's going to score more as he gets older and finds his footing more. But I mean, he looks smooth out there. I have no complaints about him. I love his game. Christoph Papp, 1 goal. I believe these numbers of assists are off the top of my head, but 9 assists, 8 assists, something like that.
9, yeah.
Last year he was 0-4-4, so no goals, 4 assists. He has offense in his game, and we saw it against, I believe, Minnesota when he drove into the zone and kind of curled back, had a nice pass, smart player. And you see him at times and you see, okay, he does have some skill, more so than some other players on the team. It's just not all clicking for him yet. He's been a healthy scratch last year, once or twice this year as well. What are your thoughts on Kristoff?
Yeah, I feel like you can almost put him in a similar tier or just group with Nico Mueller, where kind of 2 younger center guys who have shown some flashes of offensive potential, but have never really been able to put it all together yet. And like I say, the potential's there, but time is also starting to become a factor here, where you kind of need to see something, otherwise, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that leads us into our next one, Nico Mueller, who I do think has more offense in his game, and there's a play in the beginning of the year. There's times he's needs to be more aggressive, and he
Mhm.
showed that when he scored his goal this year. He charged the net and cleaned one up in front of the net. Um, he does provide in other ways on this team. He's on the PK and he's very good there, and um, he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I feel like there has to be a little bit more because we saw him like go bar down, if I remember right, against Ohio State last year to win a overtime game or put the game in overtime. And um, it's flashed a few times, and it's kind of like um, I use this a lot in baseball. If a player's hit a ball 110 miles per hour even one time, he can do it.
Mhm.
That doesn't just grow on trees. And I've
No.
seen Mueller shoot and score before at a level that's more than just kind of a lucky goal where he has an open net. But right now it's just like I said, good on defense, could produce more on offense.
Yeah, and I think, you brought up a good point with the penalty killing for Nico. The penalty killing unit hasn't been too bad for Michigan State this year, and I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly from last year, it wasn't that bad either. Um, and also just kind of a side note about Nico Mueller is he is one of the most smiley guys I've ever met in my life. Like, every time that we are able to speak to him for media availability, and which is actually we got to talk to him yesterday, and like the entire like 5 or so minutes that he's talking, he just has the biggest smile on his face. Like you can tell
Yeah.
how much he loves being there, and he loves, just interacting with us, which is kind of a fun thing to see.
Yeah, he's a fan of the Michigan State Hockey Hub Twitter. He likes tweets. He follows along quite a bit. So yeah, I definitely appreciate him. Moving on to the next, Jagger Joshua, power forward type, throws his body around, commits a lot of penalties.
Yeah,
I always thought the first couple of years he was really frustrating for me. Mostly because I thought that he held onto the puck too much and too long when he should have passed it more. I think he's improved in that aspect this year a little bit. The penalties are still an issue, and I just keep waiting for him to score more. He gets in front of the net. He seems to get the puck right in front of the net, and it goes straight into the pads. And I don't know what the answer is, but he just hasn't really developed that scoring touch.
no, he hasn't. I was just looking right now, and he's only got 4 points on the season, 1 goal and 3 assists, which is it's discouraging to see. But he kind of reminds me of a Patrick Beverly, I guess, of
Yeah,
comparing him to an NBA player, where he's gritty, he's tough, he's a guy that you like when he's on your team, but you don't
yeah.
like him on any other team.
No, and like I said, he's a good player, and
Mhm.
a lot of these players on this list are good players for different reasons. And as we move on, Mitchell Matson, kind of a fourth line center, extra skater, healthy scratch type. Um, his goal was a wide open goal, just kind of a tap in goal earlier this year. I also like his game. He's a big body, I think 6'3" or 4"
Yeah,
or
he's
something,
big.
and big dude. And he's had a few games where he's kind of looked good. And he was originally committed to North Dakota, and that's a really good program. And when he came to Michigan State, I thought, okay, maybe we have something here, and hasn't exactly worked out for him. Um, he can win. Some nights he wins so many draws, and other nights he simply doesn't. So, kind of an inconsistent game. Throws his body around, but a typical fourth line type.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just sort of frustrating seeing a guy like him with he had a lot of potential coming into the program. He was drafted by the Calgary Flames,
Hmm.
I believe in the 5th round or something like that. And so there's obviously some potential there. Like the NHL scouts saw him and thought that he could potentially be an NHL caliber player. But I mean, if he's a fourth line sort of in the lineup, out of the lineup guy that he has been for a couple of years now, I mean, it's kind of hard to say that at this point that we're going to see some sort of explosion from him. It would be pretty impressive to see that.
Yeah, and I am gonna skip on our list here, so I'm gonna talk about Tanner Kelly, who's also one of my favorite players. One goal, he does not put up points yet, but he flies around the ice. He's pestering players. I talk about this almost every week on the show, I feel like. But I really like his game. Only a freshman. I think he's gonna blossom some. I hope to see a little bit more offense to end this year to give me more hope for next year. But he does have some skill, and you've seen him kind of dangle a little bit and been able to create some crafty passes as well. And um, I do think the upside's still there. Like I said, he's only a freshman. It takes them a while sometimes. So he's been playing as a top six forward for a good chunk of the year. On the right wing on the second line or so. So, what are your thoughts on Tanner Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point with the skating ability and the speed that he sort of possesses. I honestly haven't been able to watch a whole lot of Tanner Kelly, at least before the new year started. But in the few games that I have sort of put in an extra effort to sort of watch him, I have been a little bit impressed with him, or just seen some sort of little small increments of, okay, this is something, this is something. But yeah, the points thing is kind of weird. He only has 1 point on the year. It's a goal, and he's pretty much played in every game. Um, I guess the one other thing that's sort of encouraging, he doesn't really take penalties. He's only got 2 penalties, and Michigan State commits a decent amount of penalties as a team. But I mean, as a young guy like that, it's something that I think is good to see.
Yeah, and he's missed like two wide open nets. Hit one off the post against Michigan in the first matchup against them. I remember against Ferris State, he had a really nice setup right in front of the goal on a pass from him that didn't quite convert. But I've seen a couple of flashes that say, okay, maybe, he can take a step. And that's kind of what I look for with a lot of these guys on this list. Okay, can they produce more or are they kind of what they are? And I think he's in that tier that can produce more. And I'm going to kind of clump these last three together.
Yeah.
Adam Goodser, AJ Hodges, and Kyle Haskins. To me, and this is no disrespect to them, they don't exactly play the offensive game. My issue with them is I think all of them have shown in either previous years that there is more to their game, and there's too many times this year that they're in the lineup and I don't even notice them one time. And I just think all of them, especially AJ Hodges, who I thought played well last year, I'm sorry, Kyle Haskins showed some last year, and Hodges has played well. I think it was the Western Michigan game this year. I noticed him a few times, but they're all just off the scoring sheet and at times disappear, and that's just not something that a team like this, who is not, uh, you know, filled with elite skill, you just can't afford to have players disappearing.
No, and I agree that you kind of have to group those three guys together as sort of players who you don't really can't really define what their role is on the team. They kind of just are there, and they occasionally will make a play, but you don't really notice them very often. And I remember like sort of speaking with my partner Alex Faber, who's also I think been on the show once or
Yep.
twice, and I was asking about him what he thinks about AJ Hodges and like what does he do well, and I on a personal level is kind of hard to answer those things frankly, and
Yeah.
so you hope that you can see something out of those three, but right now it's just kind of frustrating when you see him on the ice.
Yeah, and it's not that they're bad. They're not like making egregious turnovers or whiffing on pucks, making stupid passes constantly, and it's just this huge frustration thing. It's just that they are just there, and that seems to kind of be it this year. So hopefully they're gonna some of these guys on this list can chip in because we all know that the Spartans need it right now, especially with Lewandowski out. But one guy who was I was really high on to start this year, Josh Nodler, and when he was drafted by the Flames as well, fourth or fifth round, I think, and he came to Michigan State, was kind of young, and you could see the skill set immediately, but you could see he needed to grow, especially with his strength. And excuse me, and he makes plays. I think it was Friday night. I'm watching a game, the Wisconsin game. And, as I'm watching, I think, oh, there's a lane that he could pass all the way across the ice, but that's an NHL pass. That's probably, and he does it and he connects. And you're kind of like, okay, it didn't lead to anything, but like you see that vision and he has a high hockey IQ and he can make certain passes and plays that few players on this team can make. However, and he was clicking on the power play earlier in the year. 1 point over the past 11 games. What's going on with Josh Nodler? I
Yeah.
think he was on the fourth line according to the line chart on Friday. Or
Yeah, he was. He was a guy that I was also pretty high on coming into the season because he, had shown some really nice steps in his sophomore season last year. Um, and he got off to a decent start this season, but 1 point in the last 11 games, and Dan Cole has definitely noticed it, and he has been sort of hard on him. Demoted him to the fourth line. Um, he was fourth line, I believe it was the Saturday game against Minnesota. He was a fourth line center. And then I think last weekend he got kicked out to the wing. And so I think that Dan Cole is sort of trying to experiment with him and what his maybe just see if, putting him here, putting him there sort of sparks something inside of him. And I remember I actually asked Danton about Nodler 2 weeks ago, and what he sort of needs to do to get back into, you know, up in the lineup and start making plays like we've seen before. And he pretty much just said how he's a great has a great work ethic. He's a great person. He even said that he has the type of characteristics that he would let marry his daughter, is what he said. And so he said that he's seen, stretches like this before, and he said with pretty strong confidence that he feels like, Nodler will be able to come around at some point this season. And I think that kind of coincides a little bit with the struggles that Michigan State has had, over the last 6 games with, trouble scoring, because he's one of those guys that can create for others pretty well, because Michigan State doesn't have many players that can create plays for themselves. So
Yeah.
I think that if he can sort of find his groove in this last month and a half of the season, it could really help Michigan State, gain some offensive momentum heading into the Big Ten tournament.
Absolutely. And just really quick, wanted to touch on Drew DeRitter, who has just been absolutely fantastic this year. The goalies haven't had a ton of help. They're seeing so many shots,
Mhm.
and they're not always high danger type shots, but I mean, they were just seeing far too many games. They're seeing over 40 or 50 shots. He did allow 4 goals against Minnesota, 5 against Wisconsin. Personally, I'm in no way worried. I don't him and maybe Dennis Hassan are like the 2 players that I really don't worry too much about. I just trust those guys.
Mhm.
What have you seen from DeRitter? Or I guess the question should be, are you worried at all about Drew DeRitter?
I'm really not too worried. I think you kind of nailed it on the head, where defensively Michigan State has just kind of given up way too many shots on goal. And like, yeah, if you just see like 4 goals allowed 2 games ago and 5 allowed in his most recent start, you'd sort of panic if that were almost any other goalie. But I think in that Minnesota game, he faced like 60 shots on goal, which is just ridiculous. And I think that Wisconsin game they faced a lot too. So I mean, when you just had constant pressure on your goaltender like that, it's really hard to play a full 60 minutes and not, you know, stand on your head for 60 minutes. And we've seen it from him before. There have been so many games where DeRitter has bailed out this team over the last 2 seasons and has carried them and kept them inside of games, but they end up losing 2-1 because Michigan State, scored 1 goal but had like 22 shots on goal. And so,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's the same case with Pierce too, Pierce Charlison, where he's had some good moments too, but is just under constant pressure that it's just too much to handle, I feel like.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that they should do this right now. And but I could see a point where they start splitting more. Um, Pierce plays well. He's a good goalie. Get him more experience as well. And I don't want people to think of that as like tanking like you do in pro sports or anything. I think Pierce is a really good goalie, and I think that they want to play him as well. So we've seen a little bit, it started that way in the beginning of the year, and then it was DeRitter's net for a while. And then
Mhm.
we started to see Pierce kind of sprinkle in a little bit more. So um, I'm kind of wondering if they will continue with that or stick with DeRitter going forward. But a bigger issue than the goaltending, which is not much of an issue at all, is the second period. Too many times this year, I'm watching a game and I see it on Twitter as well. Holy crap. This team looks asleep at times during the second period. And they do that for stretches of the game. I don't know how many times I've said, wow, they have not even got established in the offensive zone until they're 6 minutes into the game. And they're just in the D zone, dumping and not even chasing really and switching. And it's just like a boring brand, honestly. But um, there's too many times this team is asleep at the wheel, and it happens pretty often in the second. 14 goals is how many they've scored in the second period this year, which is the least amongst the periods. And they have given up 23 goals in the second period, which is tied with the third period as well for the most. What have you seen from these woes that they're going through?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of hard to explain why it's specifically the second period that seems to be the issue, but I do think it is kind of odd how there are pretty much one or two of these stretches that you see almost on a nightly basis where Michigan State just falls asleep. And I think it was one of the Wisconsin games. It was probably Friday night where I don't think they registered their first shot on goal until like you know 14 minutes were still left in the period, and I mean that's just something that you can't have happen. And I think you said that third period goals allowed is also tied with the second, and I think part of that, at least as of recently, has been the penalties that Michigan State has been taking. And Dan Cole talked about it earlier this week, saying, not necessarily that some of the penalties are bad penalties that they're taking, but the amount of penalties that they're taking and the timing of them have just been kind of brutal because when you're killing 14, 15, 16 minutes of penalties a night, it really just messes with the flow of the lineups and everything when you've got your penalty killers out there all the time who are getting gassed because they're out there 5-on-4. And then you have those other guys who don't kill penalties who are just sitting on the bench the entire time.
Yeah, and also, I say this all the time, but almost every key to the game for me is stay out of the box because they haven't proven to me consistently that they can. Um, but the thing about the PK is obviously the other team has a higher likelihood of scoring, but also your likelihood of scoring goes extremely far down. Um, that's 2 minutes that you're most likely not going to get a scoring chance.
Mhm.
So it goes both ways, really. And with an like I say again, a team that struggles to score can't afford to spend that much time in the box. Now, we're not running long on time, but we're going to kind of go through Ohio State pretty quickly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read off some stats for a couple minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sam to kind of give us his thoughts on Ohio State and the matchup this weekend. Ohio State, 16-7-1 on absolute fire right now. 9 wins in the past 10 games. Nationally ranked team. Like we said, second in the Big Ten. They're on a roll. And this team was, I believe, the first Big Ten matchup that Michigan State had this year. Yeah, it was the first Big Ten matchup back in late October, right before Halloween. Michigan State won 2-1 that Friday, 5-1 loss the next day. Those games were in Columbus. Um, Ohio State has scoring depth. 10 players on this team have 5 or more goals, 13 players with 10 or more points. So, they're going to be able to change lines, short shifts, and still be aggressive. And that's something that it's kind of scary knowing how many shots MSU is giving up right now and kind of it's not the perfect equation for a Michigan State win going forward, but Jakob Dobes is the goalie, was a fifth round selection of Montreal a few years back, or maybe I don't remember the year. 15-6 on the year, 2.12 goals against a 0.929 save percentage. A really good goalie. And we saw that last year when we played them too. I mean, this guy's legit. Now, I think he has a good chance to at least play in some NHL games at some point in his career. So, Sam, what are your thoughts so far from what you've been able to gather on Ohio State?
I mean, yeah, they've been really impressive on how they've sort of turned their program around after being down there with Michigan State last year in the cellar of the Big Ten, and now they're up there with Michigan and Minnesota, and I think it comes to those two young guys that they have. You talked about Dobes in the net, who's been one of the better goaltenders in the Big Ten and in the country, honestly, and so he's sort of been that rock that has kept some consistency there in net. And then they also have a young scorer, and I might botch this name here, but Georgi Merkulov, I believe is how you say it. He's their leader in points as a freshman too, coming over from in Europe. And I think those two freshmen have just sort of re-energized Ohio State and has been sort of like how we were talking about a little bit before we started with Kirill Kaprizov in a little bit of a way with a young guy coming in and just sort of making plays for others and bringing energy to the team, and that's what I've noticed from Ohio State. And it's been 3 months pretty much since these two teams last met, and Ohio State has played a pretty consistent, brand of hockey, and it's paid off for them. They haven't gotten swept once this year. They've beaten Michigan, they've beaten Minnesota, they've beaten a lot of really good teams, and it's going to be a challenge for Michigan State. You know, like we talked about with these next four series, all coming against top four teams in the Big Ten. Like this is it. This is where it starts. If you wanna make a run and try and do something special for the Big Ten tournament, it's got to start here.
Which moves us into our predictions. So why don't you go ahead and give us who you think will win Friday and who you think will win Saturday?
Gosh, this is tough because I was pretty optimistic about Michigan State when the new year started. I think we all sort of were after the GLI and everything, with Michigan State sort of teetering on possibly being ranked. But obviously the last four games have not been pretty, and I think that with Lewandowski out, it's pretty hard to say with any sort of confidence that Michigan State's gonna sweep this weekend, even at home. So Friday night, I think they're gonna end up losing. A lot of games that I've covered in my 2 years, they tend to drop the first game. So I think Ohio State's probably gonna come out. They're gonna play fast and maybe win something like 4-2, like that. And then Saturday night, I can see them bouncing back, making it close. I'm gonna go Ohio State in overtime, winning 3-2.
Oh man. So we get a point, right?
We get a point,
Oh, an OT point.
a home point, pretty
I
much.
like that. I like that. That's typically my kind of sly move is I pick an overtime winner so that we get points. And so you took mine. Um, I'm gonna go with a split this weekend, and I think Ohio State's the better team, but I think Michigan State's just the more desperate team right now. And sometimes, if you back a dog into a corner and it has nowhere to go, it's going to come right at you, right? And sometimes when you have a team up against the wall and kind of needing a win at home, hopefully Michigan State has that dog mentality this weekend and is able to earn at least a split. Last time I predicted a sweep was against Minnesota, and I knew it wasn't going to happen. I just did it because I was excited, and the other guy picked a split, and I don't like picking the same. So, man, yeah, that did not go well. But Spartans Friday night, 7 p.m. East Lansing, Mun Ice Arena. Saturday night, that's Friday night. Saturday night, 6 p.m. start, Mun Ice Arena as well. Big Ten Plus. Follow along Michigan State Hockey Hub for updates for that. I will be super tuned in on Friday and likely Saturday as well, tweeting out the videos of goals, updates, whatever happens throughout the game, recap videos afterwards as well. Sam, thank you so much, and tell the people where they can find your work and how to follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, so you can find my work at statenews.com, and I think that actually misspelled my Twitter there, but it's actually, if you take out that first A, just my last name Sklar, Sklar. It's correct on the bottom there. Sklar Sam _. So you can follow me on Twitter.
Okay.
I'll be at the games this weekend with my partner Alex. We'll be providing live updates and everything for the rest of the season. We're planning on going to Yost. We're planning on going to Detroit too. So should be fun. And
I'll
yeah,
be at that game in Yost and in Detroit, so I'll hit you all up.
definitely.
And, and we'll meet up somewhere on the concourse or something. So, all right, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate it, and thanks, and have a good weekend.
Thank you, man. You too.